Good evening and welcome once more to the Canadian Orthodox Monastery of All Saints of North America. It seems we lost all or part of the last two broadcasts, so I'm going to try to reconstruct them. And we had been talking about King Herod. And I think I mentioned that someone emailed me yesterday and told me that there was some kind of an article about King Herod in a recent National Geographic magazine, which some of you might find interesting. The more we know about the persons and the historical circumstances of the events that are recorded for us in the Gospel and in the Apostles, the more clear and profound our understanding of the Scripture becomes. We discussed Herod a little, and we talked about his cruelty. The fact that Herod had started killing off his sons when he heard that one was plotting against him. He didn't know which one it was, so he decided to kill them all. He also killed one of his wives in the same slaughter, thinking that she might be somehow involved, I believe. I did make an error yesterday. I think I said that when Herod went to see Caesar Augustus after the rebellion of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, that he went to Cyprus. Actually, he went to Rhodos. Augustus Caesar came to Rhodos and began to settle scores with those who had supported the rebellion of Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra. And of course, Herod was on Mark Antony's side because Mark Antony and Herod had been old friends from their youth, from their younger days. So, as I mentioned, the Antonina castle, fortress in Jerusalem, was built by Herod and named for Mark Antony, who was his close friend. Now, we talked, of course, about the cruelty of Herod, because we wanted to demonstrate his capacity for having ordered the death of the children in Bethlehem. It would have been quite in keeping with his character. Herod had another side also. He could be extremely generous. We have records, among Roman records, of Herod's generosity when there was a dearth someplace, and he would send food and alms and really help people who were on the verge of starvation in these areas where there was a dearth. And so he had that side of his personality also. So we don't want to follow the advice of Marcus Antonius in Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, where he says that the evil that men do live after them, the good is often interred with their bones. Rather, we would like to see both sides of King Herod. He was a brilliant general, a great strategist. He defeated the Partho-Median Empire, which was marching toward the coast of the Mediterranean and threatening parts of the Roman Empire and, of course, all of Judea. And he was a master builder who developed some architectural techniques that were unique to him. They were new. The building of the city of Caesarea Maritima and the building of the seawalls were really designed by King Herod. So he was a brilliant man. And his most vicious side came out when there was a hint that somebody challenged his authority or might unseat him and take his throne. This is why he was killing off his sons. And when he heard that somebody called a new king had been born in Bethlehem, his first thought was, here's someone else to try to usurp my throne and take over my authority, so they have to be killed. Now, we don't know how long Joseph and Mary tarried in Bethlehem. We know they were still there when Christ was circumcised on the 8th day, and when he was brought into the temple on the 40th day, and received in the arms of the aged prophet and Simeon, and witnessed to by the prophetess Anna. There was 40 days. And we're not too sure how long it took the Magi to come this huge, enormous journey that they made. Riding horses, by the way, because people of their stature would never ride a camel. They would have been riding Arabian stallions by then. They wouldn't have been caught dead riding a camel. So a camel would have been their pack animal. In any case, it took a great deal of time for them to arrive. So we can say that probably at least over a year, Joseph and Mary were in Bethlehem. And Joseph, of course, being a craftsman, would have been able to work anywhere that he was, and perhaps waiting for the child to be stronger before they made that arduous journey back up to Nazareth. The fleeing away into Egypt I get some questions about it, and people ask, what were they going to do when they got to Egypt? I mean, could they speak Egyptian? How would he get a job? How would they eat? How would they survive? Well, in fact, there was a massive Jewish settlement in Alexandria in Egypt, and other places as well, but Alexandria in particular. There was a Jewish intelligentsia there, a literary level of Jews. And it was in Alexandria that the Jewish scripture was translated into Greek, I believe at the request of King Ptolemy, who wanted to build the most impressive and largest library on earth, and wanted all the books that could possibly be found to be translated into Greek. So it was at his behest that the 70 scholars translated it. Now, Joseph and Mary were both connected to a very high-ranking family. You remember that Mary's Aunt Elizabeth was a Levite of the course of Abiathar, and that her uncle Zachary was a priest in the temple and evidently served even as a high priest at one time. So she was connected in the highest levels of Hebrew society. Joseph also was likely very highly connected. In all probability, they had some relatives, some people who had an obligation of relationship to them in Alexandria. They would not have gone there to find themselves all alone, isolated, and without knowing where they were going to eat and what they were going to eat or where they were going to live. So it's well to know that and to understand it. Coming back into Bethlehem, we have no idea what Joseph's actual plans were, but they went back through Bethlehem, and Joseph then went on back up to Nazareth. And we want to talk a little bit about Nazareth later on, because there's always this perception, and sometimes we hear it by televangelists and the lot, that Nazareth was a dusty, poverty-stricken little village in the middle of nowhere up in Galilee. And that's absolutely untrue. Nazareth was a suburb of one of the most important Roman cities in the East. And in the time of Christ, the incarnation of God, of Christ's birth, Joseph is called a craftsman. It's interchangeable with carpenter, but the implication is a craftsman. Now, he likely then would have been working in the rebuilding of the city of Sepphoris, because the city had been destroyed not too long ago by Aretas, the king of Nabatea. And so the city was being rebuilt at the time. And it's interesting that many of Christ's parables and the words that he uses come from the city of Sepphoris. And we'll discuss that a little later. It's not part of the nativity story, but part of the later life of Christ. Let us just say that Nazareth, being less than 4 kilometers from the city of Sepphoris, which was being rebuilt, offered a craftsman a very lucrative living. And so we can be quite certain that Joseph and Mary were not in poverty. Some of these images are a little bit obscure.